Looks like it's 3 o'clock. We'll call our monthly meeting to order. Before we get started, are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared by any of the commissioners today?
None.
None? All right. And agenda item number 2 is to approve the consent agenda, approve the minutes, and ratify the payment of bills.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Don, second by Anthony. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Item 3 is to approve the financial statements. Assume that's Jared.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Jeremy sent out the updated version. July of 22 should be the same on both of them. It's just July of 21. There was a double payment of BP that got reversed. Should have got reversed in July of 21, but got reversed in August of 21. It was just an estimate because we hadn't got the bill before the meeting. So it should have got reversed in July of 21, but didn't happen until August. So that's why the July of 21 was off on the original financials Jeremy sent. So we fixed those, and now those will be correct. I was just going to highlight the operating expenses difference was due to some elevator maintenance that we've still been working on down at the plants. There was a $10,000 software purchased and then a little bit of extra transformer expense from the year before. So that highlights a lot of the $64,000 difference on the electric operating expense. Other than that, purchase powers increased due to higher costs, purchasing. I don't know much else. Gas looks pretty similar to last year, a little better, sold a little more. Obviously the purchase gas is higher as well. To offset that a little bit, but all in all, pretty similar on the gas side. That's all
I just had a couple of things to note, and they're in your notes, but we got into that Dynasty Power tolling agreement here a month or two ago, and so you can see for July they're actually called on the unit quite a bit. Unit 1 and called on that agreement, so we had $380,000 in revenue from the tolling agreement. So part of that obviously is just the monthly fee that we get for being on call, and then the other part is the margin that we make when they actually call in the unit for energy itself. So the sales for resales, that increase in revenue is pretty much due to that tolling agreement that we just entered into. Obviously, consequently, on the generator side of the fuel, if we're running that unit for the tolling agreement, we're going to have more fuel costs. So you can see that that's a big part of the increase there. But overall, that tolling agreement worked well for July. As Jared mentioned, obviously the market purchase power is up. The transmission costs are up. I think that's just something we need to keep an eye on, something for you guys from a holistic standpoint. I think you're going to see more volatility on both sides, not only in the purchase power that we get predominantly from the MISO market, but also the transmission costs are going up. So I did add a note in here, and maybe we'll just kind of start watching the MISO purchases as we move forward. But you can see last year we bought roughly about the same amount of megawatts last year as we did this year. So the energy purchase was fairly consistent, but you can see the pricing difference between last year. Last year we purchased power off the market at just under $30 a megawatt, and this year we're at over $50 a megawatt. So there's a significant increase. Obviously, one of the driving factors is the natural gas price. So when the wind isn't blowing, and particularly in the MISO market, coal and natural gas are the two biggest contributors to the pricing in our market. That accounts for about 80% of it. So when the natural gas prices are up, which they are, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, that's going to impact the MISO price. So I think that's going to be a consistent trend we're going to have moving forward. Typically, we've relied on the market purchases to blend down our overall cost of power because our baseload contract cost is around $50. So we were typically in that $20, $24 range of MISO purchases, so that ultimately blended down the overall cost of energy. But if we're continually seeing this $45, $50 market pricing, that isn't going to help us blend down that cost. So I'm anticipating increased costs, not only on the purchase power side, but I also anticipate us moving forward having a little bit higher power cost adjustments as we move forward. And if you'll note on there, for the power cost adjustment for this month was 1.5 cents, almost 1.6 cents. That's the highest power cost adjustment we've had since the polar vortex last year. But if you take the polar vortex anomaly out of things, that's the highest power cost adjustment we've had since 2008. So I think you're going to see some of that consistent increase in power cost adjustments, potentially also fuel cost adjustments on the fuel side, depending on where fuel costs are going to go on the gas side. Obviously, we're 70 to 80% locked in on gas contracts out to 2026, but any of that spot market gas that we're going to have to buy could be $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, which is 4 times the amount of what we used to be paying over the last several years. So that will have an impact on our operating budgets. It'll have an impact on our 5-year forecast as we move forward, and we'll tie into somewhat maybe the cash position as we move forward, both on the electric and the gas, but predominantly more on the electric side. And then transmission, there's just greater congestion out there. I think some of you guys are aware that in the MISO market, they're looking at $10 billion of transmission upgrades. Excel's looking to do some of that. They have about $1.2 billion, but there's some additional congestion costs that we're seeing in the MISO market in particular. So that's going to also increase costs on the transmission side. So we're going to have to monitor those things, but those things are going to be real. There's going to be volatility over the next several years in the short term, so we just have to monitor that stuff as we move forward. Otherwise, the gas side is essentially back to general normal conditions year to date, 2022. Obviously, we people that have been in the board last year, obviously 2021 numbers aren't going to be real indicative of what our normal gas cost is because we had the polar vortex. But this time of year, roughly around that 1.4 million in margin, that's about where we should be. 2 pieces of just things to keep in mind as we kind of get into the cost of service stuff later this year. We're still on the glide paths with the natural gas and the electric side. As part of the natural gas cost of service study the last time around, we ended up being conscious about skimming down the margins on the gas side a little bit with the rates to make sure that we didn't need to over collect. So the 37 to 40% target margin is basically following our cost of service study, and we're right at about that 39, so we're trending well on the gas side. The one thing that will probably more so than anything play a factor in that margin not hitting those ranges if the gas really spikes this fall and winter, the spot market gas, and we have large consumption where we're paying $8 for gas. That will have obviously an erosion portion on our margin. Even though we'll collect some of it back through the fuel costs, we won't necessarily collect it all back if it's that high. So but we'll watch that. We'll talk. Dan, Jen, and I will talk about gas coming up this fall, going into the winter season. Not only on the natural gas side as far as the heating volumes that we need, but also for generation side of things. So that would also play into the big unit if we have that in service, and then obviously our downtime time. So. But overall, the financials are looking pretty good for the most part today. A little bit behind on electric consumption. You can see that we're down about 5% on electric consumption. But gas is doing well. That was up. So.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, Jeremy. Does anybody else have any questions for Jeremy? Anybody care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the financial statement.
Motion by Bob, second by Kathy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Agenda item number 4 is the open forum. I see we do have a couple of guests here. Why don't you tell us who you are and what you'd like to talk about?
So Ruby's the guest of honor today. This is Ruby. She works with me at Greener Pastures. My name's Alicia Greenhagen, and we formed as a co-op, food co-op about, how many years now, but it's 2019. It's the beginning of 2019 is when we formed. And so we just want to come and share our story, but also we want to tell you a little bit that what we do is local foods. So mostly meaning handmade, and when we can buy from local sellers, we do to make local foods that are local to our area. So at first in 2019 we started, 2018 when we were driving around, we realized there was really nowhere, no retail location in McLeod County where you could buy local honey and maple syrup. You have to know a local farmer, and a lot of us do, but we just thought that was a shame. And then besides that, you couldn't buy like an organic, handmade hot coffee or hot soup. And so we are such a simple organization, but we just started with good intentions and really wanting to help to bring a better food quality to the people in our community. And so anyway, so as with any small business, we have some struggles, and you find people at Hutchinson Utilities have helped us through those. And so we've had a few struggles with our power bill. We've tried to keep it up to date to a certain degree, but we also just started in such a terrible time, and probably everybody here knows all the struggles of 19 and 20 and 21, and then now inflation in 22. And so we get behind a little bit. Usually we're not more than 2 months behind, and we're usually making payments. And so recently we just had an issue, and I wanted to share that with the board just so you could hear what it's like from a small business side, that we're trying to do our best to do a good thing for our community. And it's hard to always stay on top of everything, but if we can stay in communication and those types of things, it helps. And so anyway, I don't know, but besides, we brought a few treats for you guys just to share so you can taste what we do. And so anyway, I don't know, I brought a little sample of our organic coffee and some sample cups if you guys want to try it, if you're not ready, if it's warm right now. But I wanted Ruby to share her story too, but I just wanted to sweeten it a little by bringing something as a gift to say I know everybody works hard and everyone's trying to do a good job too. So so Ruby, do you want to just share what happened? I guess it was on Monday, I believe. Was it Monday?
Guy came into Reader's Pastures, and he had a clip on the side, and he says, I'm going to turn your power off by 1 o'clock. And I says, are you kidding? And he says, no, I'm not kidding. And then it was kind of on the road side, So then I talked to Alicia, and I handed the phone to Alicia so Alicia could talk to him.
And the only reason Ruby was there by herself is we had an employee that called in sick, so I was on my way into the store. And so she handed the phone off to me, and I just said, we had this issue one other time where we had a power bill that was late, and they were going to come and turn our power off. And I had talked to Matt, who I really appreciate that he answered the phone and talked with me. It's about 6 or 8 months ago. And and I said, we just made a payment, even though it wasn't the full payment, and I don't know how I can make payments if I'm not open, if the lights aren't on. So can I instead make some small payments instead of just cutting our power, because I'll lose all my inventory, I'll lose my employees, and I won't have anything to pay, And so so that time we worked it out. And I guess I was surprised that he showed up again this time, because we didn't receive a phone call. So we are not the building owners in our situation, we're the tenants. The building owner, the power bill right now is in her name. We have an arrangement worked out with her. The power bill's in her name. And so she's aware of the situation, and she's told us that if there was an issue and she got a phone call, she would call us. And we were told the same thing, that the power company would call us. So I was really surprised when I think I had made a payment. I guess I should know the number exactly, but it was 3 or 4 days before that for $250. We still owed $225 on the current bill. And I was just really surprised that nobody called me, because they had asked me for my phone number and said, if it happens that we're going to have to send somebody out, we'll call you first. Okay, so maybe my name's not on the account. Maybe someone decided not to, but then they could have called the owner of the building, and to my knowledge, no, they didn't. So, and again, I understand that everybody's doing their best to make things happen too, but I just want you to know on our end, it's really hard to start a small business, and the main reason we're doing it is because we care about our community. And if we have to fold, we fold, But at the same time, if we can prevent that by just having someone pick up the phone and call us instead of send someone. So Ruby, to be honest, Ruby works for like $20 a day, and there's people that just volunteer there, and then there's some staff that get paid. I am not one of them. But anyway, and so with that being said, if someone shows up at the door and I haven't even received a phone call, and they talk to someone like Ruby, or someone who's depending on their income there, that's really startling for them. And if I can do anything to prevent that, I feel responsible that I'm supposed to. And so, anyway, so I don't know if it's worth it to share my story, or if everybody, would just say, well, you just have to get your ducks in a row and figure it out. Well, maybe. And then again, most people who started a small business, if they all knew what was going to come at them, would they ever really started, So it's not easy to start a small business, and there's always going to be challenges. So anyway, I guess I would just say that the couple things that I was a little bit disappointed in was when I called here that day, the person in customer service, the last time around, some kind of odd or inappropriate things were said in terms of, well, your landlord has already helped you a lot, and some personal things that I thought, who am I talking to? Why are you telling this is a business, situation, which isn't really true, but anyway, it just seemed funny. And then they passed me to, I believe it was Jared, who might be in the room, and was that you?
Yep, you left a message when I was gone. I
Yeah.
think Jeremy called you back on Thursday.
Yeah, and so the ladies didn't tell me that he was out of office and on vacation, and I'm not saying any shame, I'm just saying it was a difficult situation for us because I didn't know that. So they were telling me we're going to turn your power off at 1, and this was 11 o'clock, and I called and left a message and talked to a lady in person who passed me to Jared's voicemail, and I had no idea he was out of office. So I called back 20 minutes later. I said, I really need to talk to someone. Is Jared back from lunch or wherever he was at? And she said, no, he's still at lunch. And I said, she said his lights are off in his office. And I said, well, is he at lunch or is he gone for the day? I don't know. I was like, well, they're going to turn my power off at 1 o'clock, so I need to know. And she said, well, let me check. And then she came back to me and she said, well, I guess he's gone on vacation. And I was like, well, if my deadline is 1 o'clock, I would appreciate a little bit more, organization if it's going to be that abrupt. It just was such a vital decision, and then to not even tell me that you sent me to someone's voicemail who's not there. And so, anyway, I'm telling you the frustration from my end. I don't want to heap on a bunch more trouble on you, but but anyway, I just said the last time this happened, you guys said you would give me a call and not send someone to the door to talk to Ruby,
Yeah, I'm not the owner. I was totally surprised. I was totally shocked.
And of course her response was, if you need $200, I'll go home and get it. And I said, no, absolutely not, Ruby. And so, no, so anyway, we'll do our best. If you guys don't want us part of Hutchinson or on Main Street, or if it's just too difficult and we end up having to say, this is it, we can't do it. But I mean, we made it through COVID. We made it through a lot of really rough stuff, and a lot of businesses have closed. Zella's went out of business. I can see the posts on Blank Steakhouse that they're desperately trying to post and get business. It's hard to have a business right now, maybe at all, but on Hutchinson Main Street, it's really hard. So anyway, so I just want to share my story. I really don't want to be rude and on that day I was really upset. So I apologize for whoever I left voicemails for. Delete them and don't ever listen to them again. But I was really startled and upset that day. And so I'm sorry that I was too strong. And I'm sorry too, Jared. So yeah.
No, I didn't think it was terrible. I just knew you were upset, so I tried to get a hold of someone as quickly as I could, even though I was dealing with my kids at the state fair. So
Yeah.
I understood that you were seeking something quickly. So.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thanks. So, and then to your credit too, he called, I think it was Jared or Jeremy, one of you guys called me back, and to be honest, I worked until 6 p.m. last night and 6 p.m. the night before, and by the time I left there, I was like, no one's at the power company anymore. And so, and I knew I was coming to this meeting today, so I just held off. And anyway, I just wanted to say a little better communication, I think, would have prevented that situation. And so, and maybe $225 is a lot. To me, it just seemed like I think we could have worked on that and not had that startling situation, so anyway. But a lot of people listened to me, so I felt like I wanted to show up here today and share it with you instead of having to have the stories passed and hard feelings and those types of things. So does anyone want any coffee or cookies? We brought a little something. Or we can leave them here for after.
Sure, you can leave them.
I'll eat the cookies. Or
Oh. Whatever you want. So I don't know, do you have feedback for us that like, should we not even be trying to make a case for this? It's a struggling business. Maybe we should just say, this is ridiculous. Why are we even trying, you know?
No, I don't think we're here to pass judgment on whether you should be trying or not. We want to support business at Hutchinson. Ratepayers are important, and we appreciate you telling your story.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
We're here to hear the good and the bad, and not everything always goes perfectly like we write a script about. But so for you coming here to share that story, we appreciate hearing that, and we'll certainly have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
It could be helpful, after talking to you on the phone, and I talked to Jeremy, he informed me of a few things too, of some of the rules and regulations, and maybe you could, unless you guys have talked about that already, kind of explain.
Jared was gonna.
Is it has to do with the tenant and the person that owns the building that's on the account, and so I'll let them explain that. So
Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to talk offline, or?
You could
Whatever
probably
you
take
have.
that. You could probably take that offline.
Let's
Yeah,
take it
whatever
offline.
you
If you just
want.
give Jared a call back, we went through that, and we've actually worked with the building tenant, so we've got things worked out with her. We've just been waiting to hear back from you, so we could go through kind of that situation. It is a little more unique than what we typically have with the tenant and the relationship.
Okay.
And then legally, what we can communicate to who and who we can't.
Okay.
That's also, I think, important for you to know. So you know what situation we're in, and if there's things that you want us to communicate that we can't, or that we're not, there's a reason why legally we can.
Okay.
But Jerry can fill you in on all that information
Okay.
this week, so you know. But I think we've got a good arrangement set up now with hopefully the proper communication channels so that you are getting notified of that, but it also that the landlord is a part of that communication channel as well and has to be.
Okay.
So hopefully that will help. I think that went well with her as well. So.
And if after hours works better, this is so.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay, and then the only other thing I'd say is I kind of wasn't surprised that situation came up when Jared was out of the office, because it just seemed like such a vital decision to leave in the hands of someone who told me she works in customer service. So I'm not diminishing anybody's role. I know we're all important, but management makes decisions for management reasons because they can see the big picture. And you may also know the pain of what it would feel like for us to lose all of our inventory if you've ever had any kind of responsibility like that. So I would ask if that can be addressed. That's a big help. That a vital decision like that wouldn't be left in the hands of someone who's in customer service, but instead in another manager's hands. When I'm doing management now, probably for the first time in my life, and now I realize that not every decision is crystal clear. And you don't always realize that when you just come to work, do your job, and go home with a paycheck, and don't always realize that someone has to coordinate all of that, and someone has to make difficult decisions at times. So I guess I was a little bit disappointed that that decision was left in someone's hands, that it didn't seem was in a position that she could count the cost. And so
I would say, in fairness, she is a manager, she is a supervisor, she's a lead, she understands the accounts, she understands the communication channels. I think there was just some miscommunication, and communication that went to a landlord I don't think was getting to you, quite frankly. And so I know that was one of the conversation points you and I had was there was no communication, when in fact what I found out there was multiple emails and phone calls to the landlord about dates, payments, times. I just don't think that got relayed down to you. And again, that's part of the disclosure and what we legally can tell landlords or people on the account versus who's not on the account. So I think we've got that resolved piece. And the other piece I would say is she typically is in communication with Jared and I about our policies and how we handle customers and budget plans and things like that. So she doesn't make those decisions unilaterally. I think there was just the uniqueness of the situation and the lack of communication all the way around, I think, caused some issues. And I think some of it was just the assumption that that stuff would be communicated to you, and it wasn't. And so we've addressed that with the other party as well. So but those are
Yeah.
good things for you to know too. I mean, we're going to do our part to make sure we're communicating with all of our customers. You know, we don't want to disconnect and turn people off either. So if there's ways that we can avoid those things, we certainly will. So.
Okay, and we can talk somewhere. I would just say it wasn't a situation I want to repeat. And I don't want to call anybody else and leave, frustrated voicemails either. And so, anyway, so thanks you guys. I appreciate it. We'll leave you guys some treats here. I don't know how to separate. We only had a couple of maple syrups left. I want to say Matt should have one because he called me back so many times to talk about it.
Comes in the box.
But otherwise, you guys have to sort it out, okay? And then I'm going to admit the cookies that I grabbed today were expired today, but I grabbed them. I didn't know if anyone was going to eat them anyway. And so anyway, and then there's a little bit of organic coffee in there, some ground coffee. We sell organic coffee roasted in Minnesota. And so anyway, so if you guys want to try some stuff, you might say, oh, we need to grow this place and see more of this. So happier, healthier diets make happier, healthier people and relationships for sure. So anyway, thank you so much, you guys. Oh, and I have the article. You guys, you've probably seen something like this already. To be honest, my mom sent it to me. It's from Fox Business, and just the title of it, more than 20 million households are behind on utility bills. And just talking about inflation and where we're all at. I don't want to make excuses for us, but I'm just saying we all know the reality of where things are at, for business owners or homeowners. It's just a difficult time. So anyway, thanks you guys. You've given me way more time than I should have taken. But anyway, Ruby.
Thank you
do
for
have
coming.
any final
Thanks,
words?
Alicia.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you're
Ruby,
welcome.
coming in.
Thank
So
you.
nice and understanding.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And Ruby's going to come and get you someday if you turn our power off. Anyway, all right. And there's some sample cups in there if anyone wants some coffee. I think we just can take up. We don't need to take them. Thank you so much. No, they can have that article. They need to be reminded of inflation. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Yeah. All
Thanks for
right.
coming in.
Yep, you too. Okay. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
All right. Agenda item number 5, communication. City Administrator.
Good afternoon, guys. I think the big thing for us is just projects. The street project around the Aquatic Center is ahead of schedule, and I think for the most part they're done with that outside the final lift that we'll do next year. Police schedule's back on schedule, or the police building's back on schedule. That's supposed to be done hopefully by the end of the year, barring delays on equipment. So that's kind of what's going on with the city.
What about the arena?
So, yeah, and that's going along well too.
It's starting to look nice.
Although we found out that it's going to take us 35 weeks to get the HVAC unit into the
Whoa.
No.
So that probably won't take place till after the hockey season. So,
Oh, wow.
It's usually going to lead times.
Yeah, does that sound familiar, Dave?
All right. Thanks, Matt. 5B divisions. Dan?
Nothing today.
Come on, Dave.
Matt kind of teed it up for me there. Just a little update on what we are dealing with lead times and cost increases for our materials, specifically on the electric side. The big thing we're dealing with right now is transformers. We're okay right now with our inventory and current levels, but it's going to get ugly, I think, sooner than later. We're looking at lead times for transformers anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half, depending on the size and what you're ordering. I've got quotes out there for a transformer now that's going to be a year and a half to even get just a normal 3-phase transformer. So we're exhausting all the avenues we can. With that, also cost increases. We're seeing cost increases up of 40, 50, 60% depending on the price of metals and things like that. So that's just with transformers alone. Conductor, we're doing pretty well. We have a good stock and a good relationship with our supplier on conductor that we keep a good level of inventory. But really, I just want, and also I guess I should say, even with fleet, you order a truck this time, you're not going to get it for a year, year and a half. So one thing to think about too when you're buying these materials, you're purchasing, for instance, we ordered the transformers July of 21, haven't received them yet. So we're ordering stuff in one year, paying for them in another year, and so to Jeremy's point, that's not easy to manage as well. So we're adjusting budgets for this year already to account for some of those increases that we plan for. We're trying to bolster some inventory by ordering, trying to build up our inventory on things, but again, you can't get the materials.
And everybody else is in the same boat, so they're all doing the same thing,
And
right?
everybody, it just makes the problem worse, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, so we're all in the same boat. We're all trying to work together to figure out the problem.
We heard Border States tell us at that summer conference that some of their vendors that supplied them were 4 years out on lead times on materials. So one of the things that was very apparent with lead times and costs is the biggest industry that's hit the hardest is the energy industry. They have I think when he showed the graphics, it was 157% increase in lead times for electric and 137% increase in lead times for gas. And all the industries that they're in, it's a 75% increase on lead time for the different industries they're in. But the vast majority of that increase was in our sector. So those are going to be things that we're going to have to watch. They have tried to push something through at the federal level where they've tried to get Secretary Granholm to create a prioritization process where manufacturers will divert raw materials to transformers in the electric industry because they're still having problems, still trying to recover from some of the disasters down south in the ERCOT market and some of the hurricanes from last year. But they basically said, thanks, but no thanks, we're not doing that. We understand if you can't meet some of your requirements, and we'll take those into considerations before we fine and penalize you. So they weren't, at this point, willing to change the prioritization of manufacturing, particularly for the electric and gas industries. Those are things that we're just going to have to be cognizant of as we move forward. And it's going to be a problem, not only in the short term, but for the foreseeable future. They think this is something that we're going to face. The vice president of operations for Border said the just-in-time inventory is no longer here anymore. So if you think you're going to get inventory just in time, you must forget that those days are over. So why that's important for us is lead times are going to get longer. Inventory, if we can bolster some of that, we will. Obviously, liquidity and cash flow is going to be everything's going to start overlapping on things. It's not going to be as clean moving forward. On that for a host of reasons. Raw materials are going up. They're diverting raw materials to storage and other areas where it's more lucrative. So that means they're pulling away from transformers. They're talking about doing other things as kind of gap fillers until real equipment comes. And so operationally, people are looking at putting in old things back in the service, changing out their distribution system and how it's designed, just because the lead times are so long. They're starting to slow down developments. Because they've basically told the housing industry, you might as well stop building because you can't occupy a home until you've got service. Well, it could be 2 years before you get stuff to build. So you're starting to see some of this stuff trickling out, and a lot of it has to do with the energy industry and not being able to get vital equipment to be bolstering not only the grid but also just increasing developments and adding in things. So
I can understand some factors incrementally moving lead times out, but a 4-year lead time or 1.5 year lead time seems really dramatic. What's the engine or the cause or the root behind those dramatic extensions of lead time? Is it raw materials that aren't domestic? Is it Russia and China messing with supply stuff? What's behind all that?
So it's a combination. So you hit on two of them. Obviously, the Ukraine-Russia instance going on is creating issues because a lot of raw materials come from some of those parts, and so that has slowed down. Logistics has gotten better, but that's slowing down. They're having issues with bringing things in on the West Coast, the Westport, Los Angeles. They haven't settled their union agreements out there, so people are trying to push stuff to the East Coast ports. So their capacity is increasing by 20 to 30%, but they don't have labor, and their ports aren't designed for that type of increase, so that's slowing down stuff coming in. We're also hearing there's labor shortages, so manufacturing facilities are ramping down to 60 to 70% capacity just because they don't have enough labor to actually, even if the materials were there, build out as fast as the supply and the demand is there. And so you've got that combination where the demand is significantly outpacing the ability to get raw materials, the ability to manufacture goods, the ability to ship goods. they're talking about trying to move more stuff over here domestically and having more domestic manufacturing. Of course, you guys know you can't just put up a facility and a plant in 6 months. Permitting is becoming an issue. Permitting is slowing down things. Tariffs are slowing things down. So it's a combination of multiple things that are going to be here in the foreseeable future, where it's just not only is it significant lead times, but as Dave mentioned, significant cost increases, just ridiculous cost increases, and so that's having an impact too. So it's not a great. They didn't really have a real great picture for us, other than the saving grace was the prices have come down a little bit in the port, but they're still for a multiplier of 4 times what they were pre-pandemic. It's not a good situation now. So it's a whole host of things that are causing all those problems, and so everyone's fighting for the little bit of materials you can get, and so it's just
Prices keep going up.
they're just going to keep going up.
So on items that we have in service now, is there anything we can do maintenance-wise to try to lengthen lifelines? Is it?
Yeah, the stuff that we continue to do, we'll continue to do the same, our maintenance programs and things. We have a good relationship with Transformer, the rebuilder, reconditioner, TNR Electric, we work with them. So things like that, they're a little bit quicker turnaround than anything new you order. So we have good relationships we've built over the years that, again, here we're sitting pretty good. It's just I'm thinking a year down the road, 2 years down the road, we use up what we have for over the next 2 years, and if we still can't get things, that's what you start thinking about. Reaching out to the city to let them know. We talked to Dan planning and letting new businesses know they're coming to town and get a hold of us as soon as possible so we can make sure we can get your equipment. Everybody's so used to the 3 to 4 week lead time. We're the last ones to hear about it. Well, now it's changing. So we're trying to get that message out that we need to talk to people right away as soon as you're ready to do something so we can get things ordered.
And even suppliers that have inventory, they're reluctant to sell that stuff too, or get rid of the 2-rate inventory you and I were talking.
Yeah, so
because their inventory is depleted.
Right. So we reaching out to suppliers. Right? Yeah, exactly. Their inventories are down, so they're trying to build inventories back up. It's a different world. It's just different. So you just got to get used to those long times and try to plan a little better, I guess.
Definitely sounds like it might be a long-term planning conversation on using some of cash available to create reserves of materials and equipment when we can.
Yeah, and just looking at things differently if we can to see where there's other opportunities to do that. But everything we're hearing is this is 3 to 5 year. This isn't a short-term thing. This is kind of what they're seeing is going to be consistent here in the foreseeable future. So now, will it change if all of a sudden they have major hurricanes and catastrophes down south? I think that's going to help move the federal legislative needle then, because if you have people, hundreds of thousands and millions of people without power, you're going to go to them and tell them, hey, you're going to have to wait 18 months to get your power because we can't get you equipment. So that's been addressed, but to this point they've been reluctant to shift the needle to the energy industry. So it's going to take something catastrophic, unfortunately, to reprioritize the raw materials and things to move it to where it's critically needed. But to this point, they haven't done that. So.
Mike?
Last week, Sterling Energy was on site. They're the company that purchased units 3, 4, and number 8. Got manuals together for them and blueprints. So they're going to start getting the project figured out and get us a scope of when we want to start. So.
I don't think I mentioned, but we started the lighting retrofit way in the back a couple months ago, and that's all done. And eventually they'll be moving out to all the offices when they get spare time, so you'll notice these lights will change. I think we used to say this year we can practice what we preached on putting energy efficient lighting in the office. So that should be done by the end of the year. That's all I have.
All right. Angie?
I'm starting to work on the 2023 health and dental insurance, so gathering information for that for the coming year.
Okay. Legal.
Nothing
Mark?
today.
Back to your general manager.
Just a couple quick things. Jared and I have been working on insurance and starting to work through that renewal process with our general liability insurance and equipment insurance. So we're fine-tuning some numbers as far as values on some of our assets, so we're working on that. I've been involved with MMUA and MMGA on some of the strategic planning moving forward. As I mentioned, we just got back, Dave and I, from the summer conference last week, so there's some good keynote speakers and some good networking up there. Did some new budgets, and so this fall will be some strategic planning for both of the agencies moving forward. I sat in on a NASB, North American Energy Standards Board meeting yesterday. FERC and NERC have asked NASB to come up with recommendations to change some of the standards that both agencies have in relation to what they call harmonizing the gas and electric industries. So what happened last year with the polar vortex is there wasn't a priority to move natural gas to some of the generating facilities so that they could generate electricity, which caused people to go without heating, caused loss of life. And this isn't a new problem, but there's a refocus on it from both regulatory agencies to really not let that happen again. And so this forum is starting to have conversations. Meetings will start kicking off here quarterly. They've got different facilitators for different groups, but the whole intention behind it is to make sure there's some significant standards put in place that would make sure in events, extreme events, that there's a priority focus for the electric industry by the natural gas industry, so that generation capacity isn't becoming an issue or a constraint because people just don't want to ship gas to those generators. So there's talk. So that's starting now, and they are able to bring something forward in the next year to FERC and NERC to at least have them consider ideas and thoughts and suggestions and different language and standards that would help bridge the gap between those two individual industries. Because a lot of what happened last year was they ended up pushing natural gas to the areas where they got the biggest profit, right? So they moved it up to the East Coast for heating, but what was failed to kind of be recognized in some of those areas is that down south, most of the heating is electric. They don't use natural gas to heat down south, so if they can't produce electricity, you can't heat your home down south, and so there needs to be a better coordination between the two industries. So that's happening. I'll be a part of some of those conversations and providing input. So that's going on. I'm on that, and meeting with MRS tomorrow on an annual satisfaction kind of survey. They go around every year and talk with their members about what things are troubling the members, what things can we do better. So I'll be meeting with Joni tomorrow and give her some input on that. So that's kind of what's happening in the short term. And then obviously we'll be starting budgets and capital here next month. So it's coming up. So that's what I got.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. Item 6 is policies. We have quite a few just to review, but it looks like we also have 5 of them to approve changes to. Angie?
We do, yes. So with the Hutchinson Utilities Commission cover page, we're adding the Facebook at Hutchinson Utilities Commission so people can go there as well for communication. In the deposits requirement, residential and commercial, we're making the same change. We're adding a sentence in there about the remaining credit balance after paying the final bill, just stating that it will be applied to the new address account. And then down in the payment of your bill, we can now accept payment through text by using Invoice Cloud, so we're adding that. And then it's just updating our website to the new format with the ending being HutchinsonMN.gov instead of CI Hutchinson MN US. Then down in the Minnesota cold weather rule, updating the date to October 1st. That just matches our state statute instead of the 15th, and then it also falls in line with the other dates of August 15th and October 1st throughout this policy. And then down in one of the paragraphs, just a grammatical error, just adding the word the to make it flow better.
Okay. That sounds good. Any questions? Anybody care to make
a motion to approve the changes to the 5 policies as recommended?
Motion by Anthony,
I'll second it.
second by Bob. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. Agenda item number 8, the new business, is to approve requisition 009284, the Plant 1 ladder access. Looks like Mike?
Yep, so the ladder access to the various levels of the roof of Plant 1 need to be redone for safety reasons. Some of the anchors aren't holding anymore. The ladders are too tight to the wall, so you can't get your full foot onto them. The standoffs up top aren't tall enough. So this is to have wheelhouse come in and they would replace the ladders to the various parts of the roof on Plant 1, and then also Unit 5, the Wardzilla, the 2 air intake fans are right on the edge of the roof on the north side, and when we service those fans, we have to lift the roof off, so you're actually on a ladder right at the edge of the roof, which is a big safety concern as well. So they would be doing a work platform around both the intake fans, so you would actually be inside a cage up on the platform, so you can safely service those units.
Okay. Any questions? Anybody care to make a motion?
I can make a motion to approve requisition 009284 for Plant 1 ladder access and work platform.
Motion by Kathy,
I'll second it.
second by Bob. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Agenda item 8B is to approve requisition 009285, Plant 1 cooling tower repair. So Mike.
So the fan deck of the cooling tower at Plant 1 is in rough shape. It's currently plywood. This would be to redoing the decking with fiberglass material, and the joists and supports would also be made of fiberglass. It would extend the life of the material versus going with plywood again. The handrail and the ladders also need to be repaired. Nozzles inside the tower, a lot of them are broken. Gearbox and the vent line on one of the fans. And the fan assembly needs to be addressed on the one fan as well. And that's per the inspection that we had done earlier this year.
All right. Questions on this one? We care to make a motion?
Move to approve requisition 009285, Plant 1 cooling tower repairs.
Motion by Anthony,
I'll second that.
second by Don. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item 8C is the 6-month solar array update.
So we installed the solar back in, or we commissioned it in November of 21, and then we talked back then we were going to go through the first 6 months and kind of give a quick update of how it's operating and so how things are going. So we are able to calculate what's generated hourly with our hourly MISO purchases, what it replaced from us having to buy that energy off the market. So in this first 6 months from January through June, it produced 522,788 kilowatt hours of energy, and using the hourly pricing, it's a cost savings of $22,234 in actual cost that we saved from buying that cost of our energy off the market. When we first installed the array, when it was being installed, we purchased it. We kind of went off the assumption of a 15% capacity factor, recall, and with this first 6 months, it's actually operating at a 19% capacity factor. So we've obviously had some pretty good sunny days through the first 6 months. So things all in all, we had a little bit of a hiccup in I believe it was April. We had one of the banks of inverters That didn't fail, we just got knocked offline for a couple weeks until we get somebody out here, we got it repaired, everything's fine. But that's the only little hiccup we've had in the 6 months of it operating, so everything seems to be working pretty well. I did hand out a little graph showing the first 6 months of how it did. You know, those are monthly
Kind of output.
peaks, I guess, on the output. It will show up on top. It did 523 megawatt hours. I just wanted to point out those dollars saved is using an average of 4.7 cents over the 6 months. Those costs that number came from 2021, and it needs to be updated inside the software. So it looks like it saved a little more than it actually did for our hourly. I just want to point out so you understand why that's different. But since it started, you look on the right side, it's produced 837 megawatt hours since last November. So, and we'll watch it the next 6 and give an annual report, and hopefully we have as good of a fall as we did spring.
Dave, for the first 6 or 7 months, the capacity factor is more than we thought. Minimal mechanical surprises, just one.
Yeah, that was actually, it just tripped. Nothing failed. It was just a trip. So
Lessons learned, or it came as advertised, I guess.
it really did so far. I mean, in early operation, so far so good. So
Thank you.
and it's nice having this software because we can give ourselves alerts and we can point out when there's issues. So that was a good adder when we did buy the array as well.
And we'll kind of match this up when we went through the bidding process and we kind of annualized the cost savings out over 25 years. We said on average we should see around $40,000 a year in cost savings. That was kind of the basis for the rent, payments to the city and the EDA, and so we should be right in that ballpark here. So the modeling should reflect this. So far so good. It's working as you mentioned, as advertised. So.
Wonderful, thank you. We have a new item. Item 8D is basically just a discussion on the Unit 1 generator. Apparently we're having some problems. So Jeremy or Mike, if we wanted to
So I'll just
talk that through.
I'll let Mike kind of give you the kind of the things that are going on. I tried encapsulating in a communication to you guys the other day what's going on. Try to give you as much detail as maybe it was important for you guys to know. Certainly Mike can fill you in on more of that information, but it's something we have to consider. We got the big unit out there. I did send you some additional information this afternoon, so I'll talk a little bit about that, but I'll let Mike kind of explain kind of what's going on with the unit, and then we'll kind of talk about cost options and where we want to go from there.
So it's we've probably been looking at it for right around a month now. There's external drains, which we refer to as tattletale drains. We found oil coming out of the one tattletale drain. We started to investigate, reached out to Jeff Fassett's group, and he specializes in turbine repair and stuff like that. They happen to be working in Delano, so one of his colleagues stopped out and went over some stuff with us that we weren't aware of. So we tried the air and oil separator filters. We tried a new lumen scavenge pump. We tried the new clutch assembly between the starter, and I think that's kind of the handful of things that they wanted us to try just to see if that would help with the issue. We're currently going through about 0.66 gallons of oil an hour during running. They recommend that if we hit the 1 gallon an hour mark to shut it down because we'll start actually flooding the gearbox and wrecking bearings and the catastrophic, I guess you could say. It's not going to explode or nothing like that, but it would trap the unit. So
Major repairs needed.
So I did send you guys just some general background. We haven't taken this thing fully out of service and out of Hutchinson since '99. So we're approaching 23 years. We have taken it out, that turbine. I sent you a picture of what it looks like. We have taken it out and done some repairs locally here on that. But some of the things that we're experiencing now or that we're looking at just can't be done here. The unit has to be pulled apart. They have to inspect, fix the problem that we have. There's also some bulletins, recommended bulletins on the unit that we haven't done yet. They're not ones that absolutely had to be done when the bulletin came out, but they're recommended bullet improvements when or at some point you take the unit out of service and send it to a vendor for GE kind of repairs. So there's kind of a twofold thing going on. One, we got to fix the problem, we got to troubleshoot the problem. Otherwise, the unit's not going to be viable, not only for our capacity, our tolling, and also for our market sales. But while it's out, we might as well get the recommended bulletins to it that are out there for the GE turbine updated while it's out. So a little bit of history on kind of when it's been out. I sent you a picture so you had a kind of a visual of what that looks like. I actually thought it was bigger. It was a bigger unit than, I don't know why I was thinking it was that big, but it fits on a truck. It's basically like a jet engine turbine, but it will have to go out. Again, they're estimating it's roughly going to be in the $2 million range. They're estimating just the logistics to ship it to one of the vendors and back is going to be around $300,000 just for the logistics and pulling it out. Those are estimates. Again, we'll have to go through a bid process, create the specs to really see what we're looking at for cost. But I wanted to get out in front of it with you guys because it is going to be a significant dollar value to have that unit repaired. It is our biggest unit in the fleet. And we're looking at 51 megawatts of generation. If that turbine's out, we lose over half of our generation capacity here. Staff certainly feels we don't want to wait until it gets to 1 gallon and then shut it down because we may limp it along through winter and then all of a sudden it goes out in the summer. We don't want that. So we think the best time to take it out of service is now while we're getting into the fall where the temperatures, the loads are a little bit less in the market. Typically the pricing's a little bit softer, although in the world that we're living in now I can't guarantee that, but typically the spring and fall is typically softer market prices because while the unit's out, we're either going to have to supply the tolling agreement with market purchases or with some of our units downtown or a combination of both because the 3 units we have downtown are roughly around 30 megawatts and that tolling agreement's for 35. So even if we had all 3 units running for the tolling, we'd still have to supplement that with some power supply off the Mazda market. But we're in a better position to take it out of service now versus doing it in the winter or the summer where we're just more subject to the market prices and the volatility in there. So that would be our recommendation to you guys. Some of the questions that have come out, which is this sheet that I sent you guys. When I've looked at some of the different scenarios in the short term, this is the most cost-effective approach is to have it fixed. Spend the money to have it fixed. We have contracts locked up on that unit out to 2030, so we have 7 more years of contractual obligations. Not only contractual obligations, but the 51 megawatts fulfills the 45 megawatts of contracts. But we're also using some of those megawatts to supply our own requirements. Since we've taken out units 3, 4, and 8, we need that full 51 megawatts to supply our own requirements and then meet the tolling agreements and the capacity contracts. So I just wanted to give you a general idea. So I had Dan put together some information. That bottom part is the current contracts we're in. So right now we have 45 megawatts locked up with AEP out to 2025. And then after 2025, we pared back capacity contracts to 41 megawatts because we think we may need a little bit of buffer, particularly if we grow with load in town, which we've talked about with some of our customers. So the contracts that we have in place will generate just under $11.5 million over the next 7 years on that unit. So we're going to collect that revenue anyway. It just matters how we supply the contract. So I've got 3 different scenarios at the top. If we just went out and bought capacity, let's say we said, hey, we're not going to fix the unit. We just need to go out and buy 51 megawatts of capacity from somewhere. That's an option. It's probably a bad option anyway, but it's really a bad option in the MISO market where it's at now because the northern region of MISO is low on capacity. So when you look at the latest auction prices, it would cost us $7,200 a megawatt hour for capacity in the northern region of MISO. So if we had to buy 51 megawatts, that would cost us $4.4 million a year to have 51 megawatts of capacity. That's just what the current auction pricing was. The middle option is, as another alternative or another scenario I want to throw out, is the latest capacity contract pricing we have with Rice Lake, which would probably be where we would be somewhere between that $5,000 and $7,000 range is where the capacity would be right now. And at that $5,000 range or $5 a kilowatt hour month, you're looking at $3 million a year in capacity if we had to buy it. And then I gave you just a low end, just a scenario of if you looked at what our current capacity contracts are with AEP and NextEra, on average it's $3,250 a megawatt that we're getting from them for capacity. Even on the low end, when the markets were good and there was abundance of capacity, which there is not now, even on the low end, you're talking $2 million a year to supply 51 megawatts of capacity. If we had to go out and buy it, if we didn't have the unit in place and we had to go out and buy it, you're looking at a minimum of $2 million a year, probably.
So in summary, we'd spend $2 million to repair it, or even if we're 100% wrong, $4 million to repair it. And it costs us $2 million a year.
Correct.
It's a no-brainer.
Pretty easy.
Right.
So it's the most cost-effective option. So in the short term, kind of the intermediate, we need this in place. This unit needs to be in place at least till 2030, because that's where our business model is running now. It's a vital component. Long term, things 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now, some of that, if we change some of the structure, some of those things will be determined by legislative outcomes. Some of that will maybe change by if technology changes and there's something that can replace that volume of megawatts more cost effective. That may be, some alternatives in there. Again, hydrogen storage, wind, solar, nuclear, some of those types of things are playing in. When it comes to the intermittent resources like wind and solar, the capacity factor isn't there right now. So I talked to Dan today. Right now, for every 1 megawatt of natural gas generation, you get 1 megawatt of capacity because that's dispatchable. It's almost guaranteed. Right now in the MISO market, for wind, you only get a 15% capacity factor credit, and solar's 50%. So let's put that in perspective. So we have a 51 megawatt unit. If we wanted to put in enough solar to get the same 51 megawatts of capacity, we need to put in a 100 megawatt solar array to get what this plant has.
It's 125 times bigger than what we just did, right?
Right. So those things are. It's not
Dave,
that
you up for it?
Yeah.
it's not that you couldn't do that. I don't think you could do it locally. We'd have to partner with another company with some big area down south or whatever the case would be. So I guess what I'm getting at is these options just aren't really feasible right now with where current technology is. One, the capacity factors aren't what natural gas is. Natural gas isn't going anywhere for the next, what I just heard yesterday, that is going anywhere for the next decade or two. That's the stopgap to carbon-free world. So there's been a retraction at the legislature that they realize you can't do away with natural gas, even if you're pushing carbon-free and more renewables, because they're not going to go through the ERCOT issue again. They're not going to go through not having dispatchable generation. They think storage may be down the road and hydrogen will be, but that's a decade out or more. So I don't see that we're going anywhere with fleet anytime soon. It just matters if technology changes enough to make it more economical on that piece. So long story short, the best option is for us to fix it. Of course, we didn't plan for a $2 million outlay of cash. We looked at the strategic planning meeting. I've just revised our 5-year forecast that I sent to the consultant for the cost of service study. The electric side obviously has been a concern for the board. I think it will be a concern for the board. I think our cash does erode over time, just as we talked about earlier. There's going to be, higher market prices, higher transmission costs, lead times, equipment's gonna be more expensive. So I would anticipate cash erosion on that side.
In the next 6 months or 5 years?
I think
or?
going forward, I think over the next 5 years, we'll have less and less cash on that side. We're gonna be eroding. We already eroded last year. If you look at the statements, July, we were down 1.3 million in cash from last year. Now, most of that was we put the solar array in. So we used cash for that was $1 million. But the last 4 or 5 months of this year, with these capital projects, with a $2 million repair to this, and then the debt service we have, we're looking at $3.3 million worth of cash outlay for those things. Well, we're not going to recover that amount of cash in the operating reserve in the next 4 or 5 months. So we're going to have a reduction in cash. So one of the things that you guys will have to wrestle with is we have financial reserve policies in place that speak to when reserves, operating reserves and cash reserves get down below the threshold that we've set. One of the action items that the board has to look at then is nothing in the current year, but over the next 3-year span, how do we get our reserves back to what we want to designate as reserves? So operating cash was the priority for the board. We want to make sure we have 6 days operating cash. Everything below that was subject to change. You guys can adjust reserves how you want. The financial policy, generally speaking, talked really about trying to have each division be solvent by themselves, carry their own reserves, their own levels. But there's enough built-in flexibility in the reserve policy that you guys can decide to do different things. You can decide to reduce reserves on the capital project side. You can make a decision where, hey, we're going to look from a cash reserve standpoint maybe a little bit more holistically in the entire organization, because we are significantly cash intensive on the gas side. We don't necessarily need all that cash, at least in the short term, although we have projects that if they come to fruition we'll need cash outlay there for transmission projects for other large customers that we're talking to. So there's built-in flexibility in the reserve policy that you guys can tweak and change things how you want. If you want to hold steadfast to those reserves, some of the options is we can do an interfund loan between the two divisions. If we don't want that entire outlay of cash right now, we can do an interfund loan. The gas can loan the electric division, so the cash flow, we moderate that a little bit more. We can do things like that, where we don't have to have significant interest rates on borrowing money as a possibility. I think on a project like this, I don't think you're looking at bonding for that. It's more of a short term, so it'd be more of an equipment note or some short term financing. Jared and I looked at our cash balances between the divisions. To me, the most sense and the cheapest alternative, if we want to just use cash out of the electric division, is just do a fund borrowing between the two.
As I looked at and thought about this last night or the night before, if you look at page 47 of today's packet, it's the cash designations report for the electric division. And the more and more I thought about it, the more and more I came back to this page. It says we have $1.2 million of excess reserves within the electric group. So if we wrote a check for $2 million, so by the way we account for it, we would overdraft the cash position in the electric. So I'm not in favor of writing the $2 million check over the electric, in theory, by accounting,
Right.
overspend our liquid cash position. We passed those policies and designated funds with intention as overarching principles of how we should make fiscal decisions for the long term. So I don't really think that making changes to accommodate today's situation is something that we should do. I think my recommendation would be that we hold fast to the principles and the designated funds that we have on the balance sheet now. And to Jeremy's point, we have more than enough cash as an organization, $10, $11 million of excess cash, most of which is generated by the gas division. So that, to Jeremy's point, I kind of got there before Jeremy even mentioned that maybe we can borrow money from the gas division. But I want it to be accounted for to keep the autonomy of the two divisions standing in their own. That'd be my thoughts.
I did talk to the auditor a couple hours ago too, and we are not required to charge interest, so that would be up to you guys.
The board.
But we are not required to charge interest.
Yeah, It got really, I got to the point really quickly today that this is something we gotta spend money on. So that's a no-brainer in my opinion. We gotta fix it sooner than later.
The other piece I would just keep in the back of your mind is we also have, if we get that approval on the Hutch substation up here, that's an $8 million project as well. So just keep it in the back of your mind. Do you do interfund loans on that? Do you do short-term borrowing on that? Again, that's a bigger project. We'll get cost recovery. We'll get made whole and then some through the Schedule O, but there's a time lag on that. So that's also a piece that you guys should keep in mind. As we go through the cost of service study and look at our budgets, not only the operating side, but the capital too, will be important for us to take a little bit more time this fall to look through some of that stuff, because there's some big projects that, we just don't come around. They're coming around once every 30, 40 years, and so you guys, good opportunities, but yet you guys are going to have to wrestle with where the cash comes from and making
When's
sure.
the cost of service study going to be completed?
I'm hoping by October,
Oh, so real.
September, October. I don't think so. We typically were changing rates. If we want to look at those, we're typically changing those in the fall because that's when usage is typically low and there's less impact. Although what we've done is kind of just restructure things. We haven't really changed rates much. But the intention would be to have something back to you guys in the fall so that as we look at the 5-year budget, as we look at cash flow and cash liquidity, as we look at some of these other projects, if we think we're not getting to where we need to be and the rates need to be looked at, then we can be looking at those for the new year in January or February. We can change rates whenever we want. We just want to try to be mindful of the impact on the customers from that regard. So,
Opportunity, large dollars, are attached to those, but those are good problems to have. And spending the money to repair this, we're not going to get equal generation any other way. So it'll sunset eventually, but not today. So you got to go out for bids.
we would have to. So a couple things for you guys to consider. One of the action items is if you guys have the ability to meet next week and a special meeting to at least approve the consulting agreement. I put that in your packet as well, or in the email I sent you. If we can get that sent, they can start drafting up the bid specs, the RFP. They would have that ready to go by the end of September. Hopefully we can get them to expedite it maybe by mid-September to have the document ready to go out. We may need to have you come back for a quick meeting to approve advertising it for bid in September, I'm hoping. And then you typically give them a 3 to 4 week lead time to allow people to bid on the RFP. So that puts you into October with hopefully, and then you'd have to come back and award the bid and then award a contract. And then once that's all done, then we would ship it out. It'd be nice if we could get it out by beginning of November.
Basically,
End of
we
October,
need it back
but-
before summer.
Yeah, I was going to say, how long will it be out of service?
We don't know. They said anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months. I would ideally like to have it back before we hit the peak winter in case we have the polar vortex and they want to call on us to generate. Or it's advantageous for us too, but we are not going to know that until we get that out to see
Until they see it too.
where it's at.
So we need to make time to get together so we can get this thing going.
First meeting being next week, it sounds like.
Yeah, at least to get the consulting agreement so he can start the bid documents.
Yeah,
Crafting
and
those
then
first.
let's plan on trying to get together next week. Angie will coordinate that. I assume.
I
Can you document that kind of calendar thing for us, Jeremy, for next meeting? Next
Yep,
week?
I can.
That timeline would
Yeah,
Roughly.
we'll send something out to you before. Yeah.
I think that I don't need it until we get to the meeting, I think, but it'd be good to have that visual.
Okay.
I will send out an email before I leave today on your
Sounds good.
availability. Okay.
So I said my piece on how I think we should pay for it. I think we should use our own cash for this one. However, Jared and Jeremy get comfortable with that.
I agree
Anybody
with them.
object to that? If we want them to finance it, I think we got to give them some direction up front, sooner than later.
Okay. I think cash makes the most sense.
Right.
Got it. The larger projects coming down the pipeline require more discussion.
Yeah. Then we got some room on the balance sheet if we want to put some leverage on it to do that for the bigger projects. But this one, I think we can cash flow.
I agree.
Yeah, and the piece with the Hutch substation, if we issue debt for that, that's also recoverable. Debt interest and stuff is recoverable in the schedule as well. If there's going to be a higher cost, then obviously, but so we can recover that as well.
We'll have a little more time to plan for that one.
We all have that, and that one will be chunked out in phases too. It won't be an entire $8 million outlay. So at that time, we may look at, hey, this year it's going to be engineering costs, and that's $700,000, and this year it's this, and this year's that. So that will be phasing over multiple years. The way that looked like the project design was going to be on that. So
We've been waiting for an opportunity like that one for quite a while.
so that'll be a long-term one. Yeah, that one will be. Just want to keep in mind.
All right. Any other discussion or comments? Nothing there? You looking for a motion to adjourn then?
So moved.
Motion by Anthony, second by Kathy. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?